Of the show, we're going to go. Oh, thank you, Claudia. Now that we're recording, it's official. We'll get started. I'm going to introduce the idea of seller impersonation fraud and provide a playbook that we have seen frequent enough that we know that they're operating. And then we have Adela from US Title and Christian from Ross Title, seasoned experts. They're going to introduce themselves because I'm not going to do it justice. But all of us, my other hat is I'm a large title agency owner in Michigan, and all of us have seen these either in our pipeline, in our local communities, or maybe even have had negative impact on this type of fraud. So we're going to get into what we've seen, the corrective action that we take, and then we're going to go through why it's happening, and we're going to go into a working session. With that, I'll ask you one thing though, in the Q&A panel, which is up on another screen that you cannot see, this is meant to be a working session for all of us. So we've got, several hundred people registered and nearly 200 on right now and growing. We're here to help talk or speak through some of these challenges that we see in this type of landscape. So the question I'll start out with is essentially, why did you tune in today? So what question were you hoping to get answered? Or what information were you hoping that we would cover that led you to spend an hour on your calendar today? Because that's the most precious commodity that we have. But I want to start with that. And there's no wrong answer. I want to be able to, as Christian and Adela are talking, to kind of sort through from an order of priority how we shape the working session at the end. All right, to jump into it. Seller impersonation fraud, vacant land fraud is now the fastest growing and newest form of fraud that we see in real estate transactions. We worked closely with US Secret Service. They provided an advisory mid-winter here, early spring. This is about 30, maybe 45 days ago. And it really walked through what the scheme was and how to prevent it. So as we go to the end and we say, hey, time to go out into your real estate community through the Association of Realtors, you have the backing of a top federal agency saying, Christian, you're not making this up. Adela, you're not making this up, right? This is the thing. There's a link. You guys will provide a link to that at the end. So how does it work? So if you take a step back, this is almost like a perfect crime, because the open public records identify typically vacant or non-improved land or unimproved land. And I never thought about this until you started to see these scams. So you can go into your county database, and the fraudsters do, they can do what's called scraping data, and they can easily, just by how the county is classifying this is either improved or unimproved, it's occupied or vacant, there will be a keyword per county that the county is using. So then they just filter those, and then they look up the information about the seller, and then they impersonate the seller. When I say impersonate the seller, I'm talking about creating, domain names with the seller in them. I'm talking about driver's licenses and state or federal issued credentials that none of us on this call or any notary that we would hire is trained to know, did the state of Michigan or California or Utah or anywhere issue that, or is it somebody impersonating them? And typically it's the picture of the money mule with all the seller information on it. So even if it was a mail away in-person notary, they're going to pass the test. So they impersonate the seller, right? Then they reach out either through one of the feeders. So it could be Zillow, Trulia. I'm not indicting them. It's just sometimes these come through verified leads. Sometimes they come directly from a listing agent, and they'll hire a listing agent or a broker to actually list the property on the MLS where the property is located. One in Michigan that was uncovered late last week, the fraudster profiled the listing agent's sold history, saw that he had sold vacant land nearby, made up a story that said, hey, you helped the Smith family at 123 46th Street, and that was vacant. And now I have something just down the road, and I used to go to church with them, and I thought you'd be a really good contact, given your experience. So know that even they're even like softening the beach or creating some credibility with the listing agent. at the time that they're asking for their services. Typically the price is either at or just below. We normally see it just below market. So if market for a vacant lot here in the West Michigan area is, let's say, $125,000, if it's buildable and stubbed in, they might say, look, I got a tax liability coming up and I'll list it for 110, or and they want a quick cash sale, light diligence. And then in almost every case that we've seen so far, there will be a request for a remote notary. They do not want to go into one of your offices, and I don't care how geographically dispersed you are. They will push back on the idea of showing up in an actual office, and they'll request a remote notary. They will either sign in front of the notary with fake credentials, and you'll get a mail away package back that, even if you use one of the national signing services, we had this recently, title agent doing anything wrong, national signing service was hired, and they showed up with really good credentials, and the mail away package was signed by the fraudster. Or in another case, this happened to be in Texas recently, they will actually impersonate the notary. So they'll find a notary, active notary commission, they'll get a stamp made, and they'll actually, stamp it themselves without having to hire the notary. And then the funds are transferred and it ends up being a wire fraud at the end of the day. Took buyer funds in, it wasn't a title defect, this was a defect in identity verification. And then the money goes out, and all of a sudden, months later, the one that I was speaking of recently closed 60 days ago, and it was just under $400,000. So what's kind of interesting about our two guests, and I'm going to introduce them next, is Christian happens to be in Florida. They're number 2 in the number of land sales by state between 2022 and 2021. You can see here how it ranks.
You're not making me feel more comfortable, Tom. Worse.
What's that?
You're making me feel worse.
No, I did. Look, man, everybody's radar has to be up on this thing. And then Utah is number 4. So right after that, with the incredible influx because of COVID in Utah and some of the northwestern states there, we have Adela. So with that, I'm going to start to monitor chat. Again, we're here for you, right? We have had free calls. We have wrestled with this as a group. I've talked to national underwriters. I've looked in the Alta chat about, how is this an insurable claim on E&O or cyber? I mean, all the discussions around this thing, but please put them into the Q&A panel. With that, Adela, I probably took a little bit too long there. Adela, I'd like you just to give maybe a quick run out on who you blame that puts you into the title industry and your current position, and then just your experience with this type of fraud profile.
Thanks. My name is Adela Pearson. I'm with U.S. Title. To blame, it was actually a newspaper ad. That's how long I've been in this. And it was just an office job. And then I've never been able to get out. So I think that's the story for most of us. I actually did get out for like 8 years and ended up back. So, which I'm glad. I do love what I do. I love property. I love escrow. I love working with people. It's the American dream, and I just love it. So with U.S. Title, I am head of escrow and processes. I've got a team that helps me out with that. That's basically what I do. So just a quick rundown of the process or the scam that we were hit with, right, Tom? That's what you want me to go through? Okay. So at the end of March, I received a phone call from one of my escrow officers up north in Ogden, Utah. He had a seller who was a mail out, and she was trying to run them through CertifID. They'd sent us their wire instructions, and she put it through CertifID, and they were failing. And she also had received an email from this seller with new wire instructions, which she thought was really odd, through a secure email. Now, just a little bit of on what U.S. Title does, pre-information. We had been hit with wire fraud with a fake payoff like 5 years ago. And because of that, we put some very strict protocols in place. I've got a set of checklists. We have 2 people who have to verify wire instructions by calling. We've got a wire Bible implemented within U.S. Title that if it matches the wire Bible, they're good to go. If it doesn't, they have to call the actual lender and get information from them and document all of that. So it's a very strict protocol on what people have to do to verify wire instructions. Then end of March, I get this call from my escrow officer, and she's like, just something's off, Adela. What can I do? Why won't it go through certified? And she was very stressed about it because it's the 11th hours at the very end, and she's got to get this done, right? People want to get paid. Well, I started asking her questions. I knew it was a VPN issue. They weren't even getting to the KBA portion of certified. I knew about the VPN issue. Tell him to turn his VPN off. She checks with them. They say, we don't have a VPN, which wasn't true, of course. So then they're just really pressuring her to call them and verify the wire instructions over the phone. And I'm saying no. So I began to ask her questions, and all of those red flags started popping up. Is it vacant land? Yes, it's vacant land. Do you know your agent? I asked her. Do you and have you worked with this agent before? Yes, I've known this agent for 20 years. Great. Does your agent know the seller? No, they don't know the seller. How did they get the listing? They were just called and asked to list this property. Okay, tell me about the process of this transaction. How long have you had it? And how difficult has this seller been? The seller was very difficult to get a hold of, very long reply times from the seller. When they sent the package out to the seller had made some odd requests. They were requiring the documents ahead of time for an attorney to look at it. That was an odd request for Utah anyway. When they sent the package back after having signed it, they didn't send back copies of their driver's licenses. So I began to research the seller. The seller's tax ID or the tax notifications were being sent to California. The notary stamp came back from Texas. The seller was telling us that they were in Georgia on a trip. They had also been very difficult with where to send the documents because they were traveling and didn't know exactly where they would be. All of those red flags were a part of it. So the one thing that I noticed that was odd, as we kept pushing back on the seller to require that they go through certified or to find another way to certify who they were, I really expected them to ghost us. I just thought they were just going to disappear, and they did not. I mean, they were hardcore pressing. I am a remote online notary. So I said, fine, let's jump on a remote online notary because I can use that platform to go through the KBA process and we can get you certified. And they would not do that. We did have a language barrier. So trying to communicate with them was difficult in trying to explain it. And then finally, they did actually get on the phone with me, and I videotaped that. And they threatened lawsuits. They were just very difficult in the whole process of trying to get them through certified or to do some other way. And I simply refused to send them money until they would. The agent, I think, did everything that they knew that they should do. I think there were lessons learned. And one of the things that I said to this agent was, at the very beginning of this, if you ever need us to run them through a KBA and you want me to jump on a run with them, do that. And you've never, it comes to you in this way again, where you don't know them, it's vacant land, even if it's not vacant land, and it's an out-of-state seller that you've never had work with. Call me and we'll get them on a run and we'll just KBA them and get them certified that way. And then you can have more confidence going into this. There was one other point. Sorry, I've forgotten it. But the agent, I
want to interrupt you there, Adela.
Yeah, please.
I want to interrupt you. What was the agent's response when you said that?
Oh, so, she was very grateful for that. She hadn't thought of it. They hadn't thought of it. I really wish that agents would, right, these larger brokerages would come up with a system or find a platform, some way just to protect you guys at the very beginning of this. Oh, the one point I was going to say with regards to the notary, it turns out that the notary had been impersonated, which is very disheartening to me because we rely heavily on mailouts, that notary is legitimate, right? And that they are verifying that person. And this poor notary in Texas, her notary stamp had been used in Arizona. There are like 5 or 6. She'd been receiving emails from all over the country that this notary stamp had been fraudulently taken from her and then used. So I think the agent was appreciative of that offer. And I think I haven't followed up with them as of late to see what they're doing to implement that. But I think on the agent end of it, if I were an agent, I'd really, really want that.
So you threw out two acronyms that I want to make sure the group isn't lost.
Great, sorry,
Ron.
thank you.
RON, which is remote online notarization. While we don't have the federal act passed, most states have adopted some form. And that's essentially, if you're an approved platform, you could administer a fully digital closing, but it does have the presence of a certified notary involved. As part of that, you mentioned an acronym KBA, that's knowledge-based authentication. So that's one of our security layers at Certified. So if I'm trying to confirm as a notary that Adela Pearson is who she says she is, knowledge-based authentication will ask questions that kind of go back into the history of Adela's profile that only she would know. And that I will agree with you at this point, Adela, that is likely more, there's more security and there's more certainty of ID validation in that than there is with a driver's license that for $200 can be created and will pass, a scan. And we'll get back a little further into ID validation. So there was a question about what KBA is, and that's what it is. Knowledge-based authentication is unique questions served to the individual that you're trying to validate, and they have to pass certain questions in a certain time frame. So Luis, anything you want to, you went off mute. So anything, did I say something wrong?
No, not at all. No, this is great. Yeah, we'll cover the ID validation here shortly.
And then I just wanted two more things. I actually started a timer. I'm at 8 minutes and 38 seconds. So I'm going to do this really fast.
Way too precise, Adela. You're on the wrong webinar. You're on the wrong webinar, girl.
I think that even, and I mentioned our strict protocol because I want to make this one statement. And we actually have caught fraud before through the protocols that we had before Certified. But I have replayed this over and over in my head and looked at the processes that we went through. And I really think that this one may have gotten past us if it wouldn't have been for that stopgap of Certified really bringing it to my attention and requiring that I start. I mean, I Googled the seller. I called the legitimate seller in California and spoke to him on the phone, right? And said, are you selling your property? And he said, no, make me an offer. Oh, great. Hey, I'm going to call you back in like 15 minutes. Let me go take care of a couple of other things, which we did. And we've worked all of that out. Also, we had recorded the warranty deed, right? Which was fine. And that was very, very fixable. So it was okay. The last thing I wanted to say is, in my last 20 seconds, is that we have to change our mindset. My escrow officer was just beside herself. She was sick about this. She felt that she had failed and was very upset. And we have to change our mindset in that we'd like to avoid this, absolutely. But I don't think that's a possibility anymore. And it's going to happen. And we just have to know that we're going to be assaulted. And we've got to be more on that defensive take, and then not take it so personally, because as soon as that emotion gets in there of, oh no, I failed, we begin to make bad decisions. We just have to know that it's going to happen and just put something in place, and then you're going to be fine.
That's a great point, Adela. I think that's one of the things that our statuses do is when a request fails, you have to be alert. You have to make sure that you step back and you escalate that, because that means that our security measures were tripped. And so that's a great point that you bring up.
So Luis, I need to introduce you now. Luis is all things kind of the product oracle at Certified. So he's been with us since the beginning, and the reason why it's so elegant and so functional and the way it looks and performs is in many ways due to Luis. So he is our senior product engineer, and he's on because we're going to go deeper into ID validation. Adela, I want to ask one last parting question. What is not working when you take a step back? We have brokers on, we have real estate agents on, we have title underwriters on, we have insurance companies on, we have lenders on, we have the whole ecosystem on. As you kind of post game this, what are some of the things that you believe are not working right now that if are not addressed, we're going to be back here a few months from now saying, hey, we really do need to take these things serious, or we need to rethink or reshape how these transactions come together?
So I don't know if I can put my finger on one specific thing with regards to what's not working. I think that if it's not working, what we have in place, especially if we're using certified, if it's not working, it's because we didn't listen to our gut. I really believe that almost every single time this happens, there was something along that path of that process, of that file, of that transaction, that someone said, that's off. And then they didn't listen to it for whatever reason, pressure to get it done, pressure for the money. We all want the deal. We don't want to take anyone off. We want our agents to keep using us. And escrow has to be better about saying, look, we need to take a second. And even if this doesn't fund until tomorrow, and I'm really sorry if that's the case, but this is what I do to keep you safe. And I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I'm going to say you're welcome for that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. That was amazing. All right, Christian, you are up. Christian, you're an attorney, right? Down in.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm an attorney. I own a law firm and a title company down here in Naples, Florida. And Tom, it was a lot of the things Adela was talking about and you were talking about. I just wrote down some notes, but you know, I think what we saw some of this land fraud years ago, and it's only gotten more sophisticated. You mentioned some of the sophistication and kind of the data mining that they do on public records. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And if we're not paying attention, it's only going to get worse.
So Christian, walk through, if you don't mind, your what part of Florida are you in? Western Florida? Are you in
Southwest Florida? You know, it's a really popular area. We've been crazy busy for 10 years, and COVID only made us even more busy. And one of the things that's very alarming to me is I used to work in Atlanta with a great law firm, Campbell and Brannon, who hopefully they're on the call. But you know, in Atlanta, that's a very traditional market where you have buyers buying their first time home or a first time move up. This is their home. This is where they live. And they come in to the closing room and it's a big show. And we spend an hour signing loan documents and it's wonderful. Florida has become so different from that. And I'm sure, Adela, you're seeing the same thing in Utah, where it's a destination and people have second homes or third homes. I never meet, like, more than half of my clients. I never even meet them. So this online or remote signing is something that is just very prevalent. And Tom, you mentioned about verifying IDs. I'm not saying it was me, but someone I'm very close with might have had a fake driver's license in college, just maybe, to buy beer, right? It's possible.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll just
someone. So if it's possible for an 18-year-old to get that, imagine the motivation for someone to get hundreds of thousands of dollars from a quick land sale deal. They don't even have to walk in Adela's office. It's alarming. It's very alarming. So
let's talk about your firsthand experience with this, Christian. And you're in a very interesting market, especially the area of Southwest Florida is just on fire with values. It's a magnet. I mean, I think Florida had, again, the largest migration or influx of population last year, and then Texas second. And I think it's all the people leaving Michigan. They're like, nah, I'm not going back. I'm not doing that winter again. But walk us through, I mean, in particular, the instance, and then what you did, you really looked to technology to say, there has to be a technological solve out here. Yeah, we're just going to streamline this.
I'm a millennial. I can't help it. I love technology. If I can use something that makes me better, I'm going to try it. And I think there is that balance between tried and true, manual methods and then the automated digital methods and some version of the two. So let me give you a quick scenario that we went through. And it's honestly, I'm not saying I had one deal. This is a weekly occurrence. This is a week. I'm not even exaggerating. So this particular deal, it hits on the points that you were talking about, Tom. It was an $850,000 vacant land deal. So these are expensive properties, and this is quarter acre. This is a small piece. $850,000 deal goes on the market for $750,000. And you mentioned that in your kind of spotting the issues, they usually come in a little bit less than what it possibly is worth. In fact, they're almost reasonable about the price. So if you're a realtor and you get a seller that reaches out to you and they're bending over backwards reasonable about the price, that's an alarm bell, right? So that's what this seller was doing, being reasonable, putting on the market for about $750,000. It then came off the market. The listing was terminated. We don't know why. Then it goes back on the market for $550,000, just like a week later. And a buyer comes in and makes an offer, $350,000. The seller jumps at it. It's a great deal. And you know, in Florida, vacant land is not without its risks. It's incredibly expensive to build here. Sometimes you need a wetlands permit. It's a challenge. So the price is one thing, it's not everything. So the buyer's getting this offer under contract. They're super excited. And then they send it to me. Now, my alarm bells start going off because my dad and I, we practiced together. He's never wanted to do vacant land deals for this very reason. It's always been a, hey, I don't do them. And when COVID hit and we got incredibly busy, it gave us even more empowerment to say, no, thank you. So he comes and he's like, look, I don't want to do this deal, but it's a friend of mine and he's also the realtor and I really want it for him. Now my alarm bells are going off because that's when you get caught, is you're trying to do something because it could help the person you're close with, or you start to rationalize your behavior. So what we do is I start asking questions. I call the buyer and I say, look, we've had a lot of problems with vacant land deals. We've never been hit, but there's always going to be a chance. And this deal kind of has some concerns. I know you got it at a good price. You know, how did you come about it? And, you know, yada, yada, yada. We find out about the listing that was expired. And I say, let's call that prior listing agent. So we do, we call the prior listing agent. She says, well, I couldn't verify the seller's identity, so we terminated it. Okay, there's another alarm bell. Yeah, I'm having the same questions. And then we call the seller and he's not local. And he's like, I'll send you my deed. I'll send you the deed. I'll send you the deed. Well, you can get the deed online. That doesn't mean anything to me. But if you want to send me the original, maybe that's something. And if you want to send me your settlement statement from when you bought the property, that'd be great. Or maybe your title policy, all these things that are not recorded. You know what his response was, Tom?
What?
I lost those in the fire.
Sure.
Of course you did. I said, okay, I understand. And all the while I'm giving the buyer and the listing agent, the selling agent updates, because I tell them, look, if I can't get comfortable with this, we're going to walk away and you need to as well. So then I keep pushing back. He says, look, I'm in Georgia. I can't do it. I can't come in. I can't meet with you. I said, great. I know my friends at Campbell and Brandon would love to meet with you. Go into one of their offices, send them, give them your ID. They'll go through their KBA, with you. And I was kind of bluffing. I hadn't asked them to do that. But you know what? That's when, Adela, you mentioned it. That's when he did start ghosting me. That's when we knew he didn't want to call. He wasn't going to get me those things. It wasn't going to happen. And I'm conflicted about these issues because you have all these people that are relying on us to get the deal closed. And I had one just a couple of months ago where I did all of that. I didn't like it. And the agents took the deal and went to a different title company. And it was fraud. So there's going to be, you have to be willing to lose the client. You have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to walk away from that check. That's something I struggle with. I want to do every deal. In fact, someone nicknamed me the Craigslist lawyer in my old office because I'll take anything. But actually, Craigslist is a wonderful example because my wife and I, we used to love using Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. And you start picking up on the little details about, oh, why did he spell that wrong? And why won't he just show up? Why won't he come and see it? And it's no different than this. So Tom, that was my wake-up call. It was like, oh gosh, this is not going away. It's only getting worse. So I call all my underwriters and I say, what do you recommend for verifying people's IDs? Because I'm thinking worst case, I'm like, I don't even know how to trust an ID anymore. And unfortunately, all my underwriters are like, what are you talking about? Just take a nice picture and you can look online to see what a Michigan ID is supposed to look like. And I'm like, wait a second, I don't even know what a Florida ID is supposed to look like, let alone a Michigan one. And so I started going online and looking to see what companies were available for verifying IDs. I thought, okay, that's something I can try to do. I looked at a company called Verif. They're based in the Netherlands, and I hated the customer service. So Louis, to you, the one thing that is special about Certified is that it's really easy to use, and my staff loves it. And Tom, to your point, I do have a lot of older clientele, and they don't even complain about Certified. That's saying something. I mean, compliments to you guys. So I go on Verif, I start getting really frustrated, but I like the idea because they promote that they're going to go to the database at each DMV and they'll verify passports. I'm like, cool, why not? That sounds great. It doesn't work. It failed in all my testing. I couldn't get it to work. I did that with 2 or 3 other companies as well. There's ID.me, which the IRS uses. They wouldn't even return my phone call. There's with Persona, which Notarize uses. So Adela was talking about remote online notaries. Notarize is one of them. And I said, well, who do they use to verify identities? I didn't like that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I talked to Tom, I talked to Luis, I talked to the team at Certified, and that's why I was kind of asked to be on this show, because I'm trying to find solutions. And to me, Certified, it shouldn't be your only thing you use. I think you have to layer it, but it's an incredibly helpful and efficient tool. I would highly recommend it when you're also doing all the other stuff.
No, Christian, checks in the mail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
But again, I mean, I think one of the superpowers that we have as a team is, I mean, Certified was born, from title, essentially for title in our early beginning. Now we're using it for other industry categories and we'll continue, but we're all chewing the same sand. And I could not agree with you more that this is a layered approach. And it's a great segue, Luis, into, so again, Luis, Senior Product Manager, Superman at Certified. Love this guy. And Luis, I want you to walk us through, let me share my screen again before I get too far ahead, on your quick history with Certified, and then I'll drive the deck and just give us an overview of ID validation, and then we can start into how we start to think about this. Many of you, it is not lost on me, have questions about foreign or out of country customers, and we are going to address that. So I see you, and we are going to get to that. So Luis, I'll hand the mic over to you, brother.
Awesome, Tom. Thank you, and thank you, Christian and Adela. Your stories are great, and it was great speaking with you. So just to pull back a little bit here. So like Payoff Protect, this was one of the features that came coming up for us. We needed, customers asked for ID validation, identity verification, and so in the style of Certified, we dove in and did the research, and what we uncovered was a little bit surprising. But one thing that I want to clarify here too is there's a lot of confusion with terms, and I know sometimes terms can be a little bit tricky to work with, but I do want to just define 2 things for us right now. So ID validation versus identity verification. So ID validation is sometimes confused with identity validation, but what ID validation is an ID, so identity document validation. And what that means is you're just checking that a document is authentic, or at least that there's no discrepancies with it. Where identity verification is actually something more layered, and it's a process that takes different approaches, some manual, some electronic. But yeah, so here's sort of our analysis of that, and it was surprising. And I hope you don't mind me putting on the spot here, Christian. But I know you mentioned that you were able to do some of the tools that you work with that fake ID that your friend had. But that's what those tools are good for. They're good for ID validation, for catching fake IDs, right? They validate document integrity. And they're good at that, and they do that through multiple layers. So what they do is they have a library of all these IDs for different states and sometimes even foreign governments, and they're able to discern based on the analysis of the imagery if a font is wrong, or the spacing is incorrect, or there's any any discrepancy with the document itself. They also are able to scan the barcodes on the IDs and decode whatever's on those barcodes and then compare it to whatever's on the ID. So that typically is the strongest end there. And if that fails, then they have biometric scans. And so this one's a little bit tricky and it is kind of fancy, but you've all probably experienced something where you can scan your face and then that then compares. And what that's doing really is just comparing that picture that was submitted with your face. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't actually check that that ID was issued by a government. And it doesn't actually check that that picture that's on the ID is actually the person that owns it. And we've seen many cases where the mule's face is on the ID. And so that's the problem with those tools. They're powerful in using them in layered approaches, but on their own, they're risky to use because they may give you a false sense of security. Similar to with KBA, so knowledge-based authentication, that's one of our layers, but it's one of multiple layers that we have. That alone is also risky to implement because that's just one piece that can unfortunately, through all the breaches that credit bureaus have had and all these hacks for telephone companies, a lot of that information could be obtained through other means. So you have to sort of layer it together. So those are ID validation tools. Integrity of documents. Then we have RON tools or remote notary tools. These are a little better and they come in different flavors as well. So you have the ones with KBA and ID validation, just ID validation or just KBA. But really the power of those tools is to be able to layer that. Is this a fake ID? Is this the person? And then can you see the person and match the likeness of that ID with the person that's on the camera with you? But as we've heard as well, sometimes mules are bold enough to, or fraudsters are bold enough to get on the camera as well, and their face matches that fake ID. And one gap that we see on those is that there's no way to secure the payment information. You might be able to share it across the chat or whatever, but there isn't a way to securely get the financial information that's important across. So really, that's why Certified is here, and our strength and what we're built for is for the identity verification process for the money movement. So we do a multi-layered approach of device and identity analysis. So it's not just who are you? It's like, is the device you're using secure? Does it match patterns that seem real? And on top of that, if we're certain about our analysis and verification, will ensure that the transaction for $1 million. And so that's we take on the risk of that for you guys. But yeah, open to any discussions here from Christian and Adela or Tom. I know you all had experience.
Yeah, I want to pull the ID thread because I think this was a few things came as a surprise as we were prepping for this webinar, but also, I've got 5 active cases in West Michigan for seller impersonation fraud, like right now. One is, as we went through the analysis, and Christian, you had already done this, is the ID validation, these solutions don't tap into active live databases. And Adela, I don't know if it was you, but somebody had mentioned recently that this person dies 60 days ago. It's obviously going to be an estate property. License shows up. Is that you, Christian? License shows up in this dude's name. And all of a sudden we have an active seller. Well, if they had access to a live database, they would have known that, hold on a second, here was the picture of the individual. Because guys, it looks like it's John Doe. It's the Money Mules picture that's going to show up in front of the notary, right? So Christian, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was a actually very large purchase. I think it was like a $2 million land sale on Marco Island, Florida. And, we had our multi-layered approach. The seller had hired me as the attorney for them. And then I find out that the seller died 60 days earlier. And one of the agents that I work with on separate deal, totally separate deal, said, wait a second, I went to his funeral. Why are you doing that? It was awful. It was really scary. The buyer was freaked out. The agents were freaked out. And the listing agent said, hey, I met with the seller. I don't know what. And that's where it's like, wow, these people are really brazen. They're really brazen. And so it is that, you said it a couple of times, it's that multi-layered approach that gets it. It's scary. I think what we also got on that one, Tom, is we've added in a layer of sending a mail, like sending something in the mail to the seller's address as listed on the county assessor's website. So we send a letter and it says, you know, we've been hired to represent you or to sell your property. And so when they got that, the daughter had called me and said, what is this? You know, and it was like on Monday, the other realtor said, no, I went to his funeral. On Tuesday, the daughter called me. So it was, if one hadn't caught, the other one would have. If we were using CertifID at the time, maybe we would have been able to do it, catch it a third time in that sense.
Yeah, so let's go into the workflow, and I don't want to take this conversation hostage, Luis. Let's all weigh in here. We'll start to unpeel some of these questions. I want to answer the question about KBA again. Knowledge-based KBA is knowledge-based authentication that is administered to somebody that you're seeking to verify their identity, not the ID document from. And these would be questions that could span from vehicles that were owned to address associations to colleges to you name it. And the other thing that you need, if we go up to 80,000 feet, here's how we see these things unfolding. Normally, the fraud is being perpetrated outside of the United States. So when Adela, you picked up a VPN and our digital signals and our digital analysis said, hey, this is a little bit too opaque, or we had a gentleman on a couple months ago where we identified the seller was in Western Africa, that's a significant layer. So typically the scams are running out of these massive centers essentially. And then once they get somebody on the line, they will recruit somebody either wittingly or unwittingly to show up and present themselves with fake credentials. So it hops from international coordination and the attack email and that to a very, kinetic on, in country experience for the closing. So, all right, here's how we can think about this. And again, no pride in either authorship or I guess comprehensive. I think we're all building this bridge as we cross it right now, but here's how we see it so far. You treat any vacant lands as a fraudulent transaction. You have to have a signal at your order entry department. When they start to press keys into your TPS system, there has to be a flag that gets raised that says, okay, this guy's different. And then what are we going to do? And it's a blend between technology, process and procedure like Adela's put together, in recruiting our referral partners to curate and confirm the story around the identity of the property owner. Because guys, guess what? This is not a title defect issue. This is wire fraud based on a longer and larger con that they're running in impersonating, rather than a mortgage lender on a payoff, or rather than a title company on a buyer cash to close, they're just impersonating the identity. All of this stuff that we've seen is predicated on impersonated identity. This is not a title failure. Christian, you searched the right property. You identified the liens. You identified, any of that stuff, right? So treat the vacant land or we will start to see this, unfortunately. We've seen it in the rental scams during COVID, the non-owner occupied property, but it's still improved. So your second, your third properties. Let's just focus on vacant lands, right? What we've implemented in our agency is the solution that was announced yesterday is we verify the seller and we will collect their bank information at the order entry phase. I'm not spending time on a file unless someone's willing to say, you know what, I am who actually is on the deed of this property. Other ways to look at this also, and we talked about this, and then I'll open it up, guys, is asking the real estate agents, what are you doing to verify identity? If there was one learning over the last 45 days that surprised me, is the fact that most real estate agents, especially in vacant land, will never meet their clients until the closing table. They're coming in through lead sources. I mentioned how it came in through like a trusted referral, but you have to assume there can be no assumption that the real estate agent actually knows who this person is, no matter what story they've been being told. And guys, I've had real estate agents that did everything right. They asked for the ID. They said, okay, it looks good. Your story ties out, let's list it, right? So what are they doing to verify?
You know what I
Making-
saw recently, Tom, is that underwriters have been more aggressive at asking us to provide a sworn affidavit from the real estate agent regarding their relationship with the seller. I haven't seen that across the board, but I had it come up with I think it was maybe a Fidelity title commitment that came through and a Chicago title that came through, a commitment. And it was extreme. They wanted the seller's attorney, me, to swear to something. They wanted the seller's realtor to do the same. So I put that into my process, and I'll tell the agent, I said, you better be sure, because you're going to have to sign to it. And that's a surprising thing, and that's the point. We want to shock and awe you. We want you to wait a second. All right, if I'm going to be liable, let me do some research.
Well, to pull that again, will the underwriter code it as agent error? Again, it wasn't a title defect. This was impersonation. I would argue it's going to fall into E&O, or it's going to fall into cyber, and then they're going to class it as wire fraud. There was a conversation going on in the Alta Bulletin right now. They classed it as wire fraud, no coverage. Or if you do have coverage, it doesn't attach at a level where you can show the conditions precedent to file a claim. So asking the real estate agent, if you're not using certified, now you have to get your hands in the dirt. Now you have to, Adele, both of you had mentioned this gut level check, having a culture and having the training internally to say, okay, here's the roadmap then. We're going to do this the hard way. We could get to an end where we're comfortable, but we got to put in and we got to document those steps. And along the path, it's the subtleties that are going to trip you to understanding, hey, something's off here. Why are you only communicating every 24 hours? What do you mean you can't go to a law office that has offices on every corner in Georgia? Like, none of that makes sense if you're truly motivated to sell this property. Asking for an ID, I love this. Out of band communication. Show me your closing statement. Take a picture and send it to me digitally if you want, of the jacket for the title policy that you received when you closed on it. Who did you close with and in what office? So I could talk to one of my friends or colleagues to say, can you pull a prior and send it over to me? Looking at the taxing authority, not just the county. Guys, they figured out it's vacant land. They're not going to get mail there. So then they hop to the taxing authority, and that's the address where they put the fake ID. In the most recent tax payment receipt, like, hey, just show me proof that you paid the last tax bill. Send me a copy of the check or a copy of the statement. And there was a comment in here, doing a phone number check, and Alta has promoted phone number checks. That's one layer though, because I can spoof a number. I could grab my phone and in 10 seconds, make it seem like Adela is calling Christian from my cell phone. And then you run that number and it's going to show up as, yep. So that's a layer, but again, just be careful of that in and of itself.
So one thing to highlight here, Tom.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, one thing to highlight here is that I think the goal is to make sure that the certified request is sent early on, and these additional steps that we have here can be used if there's any anomaly in what we've essentially detected on the request. If the request fails or is problematic, then we can essentially escalate the ask for the seller and actually ask for the title commitment. But maybe it's not asking it all up front, but it's getting the request out as soon as possible so that our device analysis and our ID validation can get to working. And then, that protects you up front, and then you can escalate the process as needed.
Yeah, why you would do it up front is in our organization, we have 4 different departments that from order entry to post-close, there'd be that inherent trust that, well, one of my coworkers must have done something along the way. Who am I to question that? Well, let's cut that right off at the pass so that, Adela, when they are getting aggressive and you had mentioned that, hey, I got to have this funded, there isn't this inherent, I don't know if I should question Sue's work or Tim's work, that they've been working on this thing for 4 days. I'm just the disbursement officer. Who am I to question it at this point? And we just can't have that.
I was going to say, if we wait to the end, it becomes more of an accusatory situation, which can be inflammatory, especially if these people are legitimate. And doing that at the beginning, first of all, instills a trust from the seller who might be legitimate. in understanding what it is that we're doing. And it also takes, like you said, that pressure away so that I'm not caught up in the emotion of pleasing people and making sure that I get this deal done for someone. I'm not caught up in that emotion. I can take care of all of that. And it gives you time to be calm and really see things for what they are. Bad people will always affect good people. And being able to have an approach or learning an approach where we can get information from a legitimate seller who is being damaged because there are a lot of bad people out there who are committing fraud, and requiring that they go through multiple steps to prove who they say they are can be very that can be very bothersome to people. But if we do that at the beginning, then we're eliminating a lot of that, and we glean trust rather than putting them on the defensive, making them think that we're accusing them of something.
Completely agree. And Luis, I'll credit again the great work of the team in short order. We've built all the collateral for you guys to start to have this internal and external conversation, because I think there is a great opportunity for all of us that are on this to take a leadership position, almost 300 on right now, to say, you know what, I'm going to go into my local community and I'm going to educate around this. I'm going to recruit my agents. I'm going to put contrast dye in. If they're not using us, you might be more exposed. Make sure your title company is using this. But the more important thing is, letting the agents understand that they're at risk also. There's a question, are agents being held liable for not properly? No, I mean, this is like day one of this right now, and the courts won't render decisions probably for another 18 to 24 months because of the complexity of these transactions. Many of them will settle, but we won't have hard precedent for possibly years to come. And better hygiene to get up front and say, okay, can we work together? Can I educate you about my process? Can I educate you about certified? And then the spillway that opens if we're not able to do that. I'm not going to kill it on day one, but I'm going to ask for your encouragement with your clients to participate in what's going to be a much more multi-factored, multi-layered, transaction. So we have everything from what it is, how it's used, and then we'll have a link on, kind of walking through these materials.
Hey, Tom, to that last point, I would say agents are absolutely being thrown onto these lawsuits, and they're having, when you get added into a lawsuit, it doesn't cost the person suing anything extra to sue you, in addition to the title company, in addition to the buyer and whoever else. So even if they're not liable, they've got a problem, and they're going to have to hire an attorney or put the deductible down on an E&O policy that even covers it. And what I'm telling my clients, and what we talk about in my firm, is you always want to look like you're the victim, that you did everything you could to avoid this from happening. So it's elevating the things that you're doing to avoid this to happen. And if it happens anyways, which it's going to happen, if it happens anyways, you get to stand up in front of the judge and say, Your Honor, I did this, and I hate that this still happened.
Right. No, that's a good point. We call it the standard of care, Christian. We know that it started to evolve with some early cases 10 years or so ago around this topic, and it's continuing to evolve. But the evolution of it is knowing your customer, right? Understanding that before you look, the market's tight. For those of you that are on, we're not oblivious to the idea that listings are at a historical low right now, and every deal does matter. But they're also kind of preying on the lack of inventory and the nature of susceptibility that you look over some things just to get a really solid, $800,000 land listing, in the Naples area.
Louise,
Yep.
I'm wondering, were you going to address the non-US citizen KBA issue?
We don't currently have that support, but we are currently researching it. But we don't currently have a way to verify that. I'm happy to answer any questions specifically.
Someone had asked about that with regards to if they're not an American citizen, because I know Certified can't do that. What are other people doing to get through that, Christian?
Yeah, so I deal with this a lot, and it was one of the first things I talked to Tom's company about was, even if you're in Canada you're out of the country. And so this layer that certified offers is just, the rug gets taken right out from underneath me. I don't like it. But that's why we have layers. We have all these other things. And at that point, Adela, I mean, your example was the best in that you just had this gut check and you're like, look, we're not doing this until I get comfortable, and I'm going to add in a bunch of other things that I wouldn't make someone who did go through certified do.
If someone's an American citizen, though, I can put them through the remote online notary if they're sitting in Mexico.
That's a good alternate.
Yeah. But if they're not an American citizen, my KBA doesn't work through my RON platform either. I know that I've used Notary Cam, however, they use biometrics, and I've got to go through my underwriter and get approval for all of that. That's been what I've done. Are there any other options that you guys have run into for that?
So to me, it's a very manual process at that point. So
becomes next best practices.
Yeah, something on the slides that said the color copy of the IDs, because that's harder to fake. I've done a Zoom call with a seller once, and I said, hey, do you, how familiar with Naples are you? And I used to go down when I was a kid, and we talked about, the golf course I used to go to in hole 9, and I started getting really comfortable because I'm like, wow, if they know all this information, we're all screwed. But then I talked to the listing agent. The listing agent had a personal relationship with that person's family. It was probated. They'd hired a local attorney. They had wetlands permits, so I knew that they had actually spent money. So I can get comfortable. It's just that my favorite layer wasn't available to me, and that was okay.
No, but I think I appreciate the candor, because you'll have some folks that just aren't on the technology grid, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the out of band type of creative stuff. It's time to get creative and curious and be your own advocate for identity. Like, really start to think through how would only this person know that. I love the idea, Christian, of where's the closing statement. You know what? I'll call the title company. Who was your last agent? Like,
I did that yesterday, Tom.
I'll pull that thread all day long. Just give me a breadcrumb and I'll follow the trail.
Yep. So yesterday I reached out to the attorney that did a deed prep back in 2012. And I just found her on the Florida Bar website. I called her and I said, do you remember anything about it? She says, no, but you could call this person. I know they were my contact, and you should call my old firm. And we just started following those breadcrumbs. The other thing, Tom, is you remember those lottery commercials where they would be so upset that they only won, $100,000. So upset. I use that as my example. It's like, oh man, well, at least it was only $100,000 that I got sued for. Thank goodness it wasn't that 800 deal. It doesn't work. I treat this like so seriously, and I'm trying to implement it on every piece of my business, because if this is an issue on vacant land, I don't want to be the first example when it happens to an unoccupied condo. I don't want that. So
I know.
Find your process and always be changing it. I mean, you've got 257 people on this right now. I'll assume one of them is trying to copy whatever I'm doing so they can break through. So there are a lot of things that we do that I'm not, and Adele's not explaining, because we need to be creative, like you said, Tom. We need to be reactive and proactive.
They'll break it. They always do, right? The bad guys will always come in and break it. So we've got to be on our guard. They'll break through. And you said, so you can stand up in front of the judge and say, this is what I did, but then also be able to say, and now this is what I'm going to do, right? Because they got through somewhere. Yeah.
There was a question on geolocation, and guys, that's why, I mean, I'm a heavy user in the title agency and creator of Certified, but it's because it works. Like, we're going to be able to identify the first layer that we use is geolocation. And depending on the device, we're talking hundreds of unique markers. And in most cases, when we're not able to identify, validate the identity of an individual, it's because the digital device analysis is coming back with too high of a risk score. In a lot of ways, it's out of country, or there's a geomasking VPN, or I've got some IP address whatever it is. So that's seamless to the user. Like, the fraudster doesn't know the packet of intel that just came back to us to say, look, man, we're opening up the spillway now because we can't get through this. And we've spent years refining that digital footprint. And it's the best leading indicator that we have, at least to go to first base and say, okay, we're good. Then we go to knowledge-based authentication. Then we send them a token, and then we unlock this session where they can either confirm or provide their bank information. That's another thing. You're a seller. If you're not willing to give your bank information so I can wire you funds securely at closing, what are we doing here? Like, what are we really doing here, right? And it's those things. So
And the other issue is in my office, it's like you're never too good to get a check. You're never too good to get a check. The wire is a courtesy. I'm not required to wire you anything. So I'll do your closing all day, but you're getting a check. That's the other thing. You have to be strong. You have to be, confident. And the other thing is you got to be running faster than the other slowest guys, because the bear will eat them first.
that's what I say to my wife when we hike out west. Not worried about the bear. Just not. I just got to make sure the 2 kids are in front of me. All right. If you guys want to learn more about this particular, we had a large news announcement. You'll be hearing about it in the pubs, but we have a starting point, a meaningful starting point where you can check the box. And guess what, guys? If certified is used and money is transferred by wire, we provide that layer of coverage and insurance against it. So there's a link in the deck here where you can reach out to us, and we'll go through the questions, and to the extent that we were not able to answer some of those, we'll go through and we'll respond and make sure that we give proper attention. There were some state-specific questions that I didn't address on this, but I want to spend a little bit more time kind of running out. So guys, this was absolutely awesome. I want to thank you, Adela. I want to thank you, Christian and Luis, for having the courage to come on here and just talk about what we're all facing nationally. And guys, this is a national issue. Our system picks it up daily, and federal law enforcement, this is a concern, because the notice tail, like a mortgage payoff, could be very, very long.
And it's very easy to use, Tom. It's a really good option if you're not already using it elsewhere, but it's so user friendly. That's a huge selling point of this.
People are crazy not to. They really are.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Music to your ears, Luis. Great job.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we'll sign off.
Thank you, guys. It was great.
We'll see you next month for the To Catch a Fraudster series. Stay safe, and look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks,
Good luck,
guys.
everybody.
Take care.